Welcome to Catholic Culture Audiobooks, a production of CatholicCulture.org and under the patronage of St. John Henry Newman. Today's reading, The Danger of Accomplishments, found in Parochial and Plain Sermons, Volume 2, by St. John Henry Newman, narrated by James T. Majewski. In the hearts of all that are wise-hearted, I have put wisdom. Exodus 31:6. St. Luke differed from his fellow evangelists and fellow disciples in having received the advantages of what is called a liberal education. In this respect, he resembled St. Paul, who, with equal accomplishments, appears to have possessed even more learning. He is said to have been a native of Antioch, a city celebrated for the refined habits and cultivated intellect of its inhabitants. And his profession was that of a physician or surgeon, which of itself evidences him to have been in point of education something above the generality of men. This is confirmed by the character of his writings, which are superior in composition to any part of the New Testament, excepting some of St. Paul's epistles. There are persons who doubt whether what are called accomplishments, whether in literature or in the fine arts, can be consistent with deep and practical seriousness of mind. They think that attention to these argues a lightness of mind, and, at least, takes up time which might be better employed. And I confess, at first sight they seem to be able to say much in defense of their opinion. Yet notwithstanding, St. Luke and St. Paul were accomplished men, and evidently took pleasure in their accomplishments. I am not speaking of human learning. This also many men think inconsistent with simple, uncorrupted faith. They suppose that learning must make a man proud. This is, of course, a great mistake. But of it I am not speaking, but of an over-jealousy of accomplishments. The elegant arts and studies, such as poetry, literary composition, painting, music, and the like, which are considered not indeed to make a man proud, but to make him trifling. Of this opinion, how far it is true and how far not true, I am going to speak, being led to the consideration of it by the known fact that St. Luke was a polished writer and yet an evangelist. Now, that the accomplishments I speak of have a tendency to make us trifling and unmanly, and therefore are to be viewed by each of us with suspicion as far as regards himself, I am ready to admit, and shall presently make clear. I allow that in matter of fact, refinement and luxury, elegance and effeminacy go together. Antioch, the most polished, was the most voluptuous city of Asia. But the abuse of good things is no argument against the things themselves. Mental cultivation may be a divine gift, though it is abused. All God's gifts are perverted by man. Health, strength, intellectual power are all turned by sinners to bad purposes. Yet they are not evil in themselves. Therefore, an acquaintance with the elegant arts may be a gift and a good, and intended to be an instrument of God's glory, though numbers who have it are rendered thereby indolent, luxurious, and feeble-minded. But the account of the building of the tabernacle in the wilderness, from which the text is taken, is decisive on this point. It is too long to read to you, but a few verses will remind you of the nature of it. Thou shalt speak unto all that are wise-hearted, whom I have filled with the spirit of wisdom, that they may make Aaron's garments to consecrate him, that he may minister unto me in the priest's office. See, I have called by name Bezalel, and have filled him with the Spirit of God, in wisdom and in understanding, and in knowledge, and in all manner of workmanship, to devise cunning works, to work in gold and in silver and in brass, and in cutting of stones, to set them, and in carving of timber, to work all manner of workmanship. Take ye from among you an offering unto the Lord. Whosoever is of a willing heart, let him bring it, an offering of the Lord, gold and silver and brass, and blue and purple and scarlet, and fine linen and goat's hair, and ram's skins dyed red, and badger's skins, and shittim wood, and oil for the light, and spices for anointing oil and for the sweet incense, and onyx stones, and stones to be set for the ephod and for the breastplate. And every wise-hearted among you shall come and make all that the Lord hath commanded. How then is it that what in itself is of so excellent, and I may say, divine in nature, is yet so commonly perverted? I proceed to state what is the danger, as it appears to me, of being accomplished, with a view to answer this question. Now, the danger of an elegant and polite education is that it separates feeling and acting. It teaches us to think, speak, and be affected aright, without forcing us to practice what is right. I will take an illustration of this, though somewhat a familiar one, from the effect produced upon the mind by reading what is commonly called a romance or novel, which comes under the description of polite literature, of which I am speaking. Such works contain many good sentiments. I am taking the better sort of them. Characters, too, are introduced, virtuous, noble, patient under suffering, and triumphing at length over misfortune. The great truths of religion are upheld, we will suppose, and enforced, and our affections excited and interested in what is good and true. But it is all fiction. It does not exist out of a book which contains the beginning and end of it. We have nothing to do. We read, are affected, softened or roused, and that is all. We cool again. Nothing comes of it. Now observe the effect of this. God has made us feel in order that we may go on to act in consequence of feeling. If, then, we allow our feelings to be excited without acting upon them, we do mischief to the moral system within us, just as we might spoil a watch or other piece of mechanism by playing with the wheels of it. We weaken its springs, and they cease to act truly. Accordingly, when we have got into the habit of amusing ourselves with these works of fiction, we come at length to feel the excitement without the slightest thought or tendency to act upon it. And since it is very difficult to begin any duty without some emotion or other, that is, to begin on mere principles of dry reasoning, a grave question arises how, after destroying the connection between feeling and acting, how shall we get ourselves to act when circumstances make it our duty to do so? For instance, we will say we have read again and again of the heroism of facing danger, and we have glowed with the thought of its nobleness. We have felt how great it is to bear pain and submit to indignities rather than wound our conscience. And all this again and again, when we had no opportunity of carrying our good feelings into practice. Now suppose at length we actually come into trial, and, let us say, our feelings become roused, as often before, at the thought of boldly resisting temptations to cowardice. Shall we therefore do our duty, quitting ourselves like men? Rather, we are likely to talk loudly and then run from the danger. Why? Rather, let us ask, why not? What is to keep us from yielding? Because we feel aright? Nay, we have again and again felt aright and thought aright without accustoming ourselves to act aright. And though there was an original connection in our minds between feeling and acting, there is none now. The wires within us, as they may be called, are loosened and powerless. And what is here instanced of fortitude is true in all cases of duty. The refinement which literature gives is that of thinking, feeling, knowing, and speaking right, not of acting right. And thus, while it makes the manners amiable and the conversation decorous and agreeable, it has no tendency to make the conduct, the practice of the man, virtuous. Observe, I have supposed the works of fiction I speak of to inculcate right sentiments, though such works, playbooks for example, are often vicious and immoral, But even at best, supposing them well-principled, still, after all, at best, they are, I say, dangerous in themselves. That is, if we allow refinement to stand in the place of hearty, rough-handed obedience. It follows that I am much opposed to certain religious novels, which some persons think so useful. That they sometimes do good, I am far from denying, but they do more harm than good. They do harm on the whole. They lead men to cultivate the religious affections separate from religious practice. And here I might speak of that entire religious system, miscalled religious, which makes Christian faith consist not in the honest and plain practice of what is right, but in the luxury of excited religious feeling, in a mere meditating on our blessed Lord, and dwelling as in a reverie on what he has done for us. For such indolent contemplation will no more sanctify a man in fact than reading a poem or listening to a chant or psalm tune. The case is the same with the arts last alluded to, poetry and music. These are especially likely to make us unmanly, if we are not on our guard, as exciting emotions without ensuring correspondent practice, and so destroying the connection between feeling and acting. For I here mean by unmanliness the inability to do with ourselves what we wish, the saying fine things, and yet lying slothfully on our couch, as if we could not get up, though we ever so much wished it. And here I must notice something besides inelegant accomplishments, which goes to make us over-refined and fastidious, and falsely delicate. In books, everything is made beautiful in its way. Pictures are drawn of complete virtue. Little is said about failures, and little or nothing of the drudgery of ordinary, everyday obedience, which is neither poetical nor interesting. True faith teaches us to do numberless disagreeable things for Christ's sake, to bear petty annoyances which we find written down in no book. In most books, Christian conduct is made grand, elevated, and splendid, so that anyone who only knows of true religion from books, and not from actual endeavors to be religious, is sure to be offended at religion when he actually comes upon it, from the roughness and the humbleness of his duties, and his necessary deficiencies in doing them. It is beautiful in a picture to wash the disciples' feet, but the sands of the real desert have no luster in them to compensate for the servile nature of the occupation. And further still, it must be observed that the art of composing, which is a chief accomplishment, has in itself a tendency to make us artificial and insincere. For to be ever attending to the fitness and propriety of our words is, or at least there is the risk of it being, a kind of acting. And knowing what can be said on both sides of a subject is a main step towards thinking the one as good as the other. Hence men in ancient times who cultivated polite literature went by the name of sophists. That is, men who wrote elegantly and talked eloquently on any subject whatever, right or wrong. St. Luke perchance might have been such a sophist, had he not been a Christian. Such are some of the dangers of elegant accomplishments, and they beset more or less all educated persons. And of these perhaps not the least such females as happen to have no very direct duties, and are above the drudgery of common life, and hence are apt to become fastidious and fine, to love a luxurious ease, and to amuse themselves in mere elegant pursuits, the while they admire and profess what is religious and virtuous, and think that they really possess the character of mind which they esteem. With these thoughts before us, it is necessary to look back to the Scripture instances which I began by adducing, to avoid the conclusion that accomplishments are positively dangerous and unworthy a Christian. But St. Luke and St. Paul show us that we may be sturdy workers in the Lord's service and bear our cross manfully, though we be adorned with all the learning of the Egyptians. Or, rather, that the resources of literature and the graces of a cultivated mind may be made both a lawful source of enjoyment to the possessor and a means of introducing and recommending the truth to others. While the history of the tabernacle shows that all the cunning arts and precious possessions of this world may be consecrated to a religious service and be made to speak of the world to come. I conclude, then, with the following cautions, to which the foregoing remarks lead. First, we must avoid giving too much time to lighter occupations. And next, we must never allow ourselves to read works of fiction or poetry, or to interest ourselves in the fine arts, for the mere sake of the things themselves. But keep in mind all along that we are Christians and accountable beings who have fixed principles of right and wrong by which all things must be tried, and have religious habits to be matured within them, towards which all things are to be made subservient. Nothing is more common among accomplished people than the habit of reading books so entirely for reading's sake as to praise and blame the actions and persons described in a random way, according to their fancy, not considering whether they are really good or bad according to the standard of moral truth. I would not be austere, but when this is done habitually, surely it is dangerous. Such too is the abuse of poetical talent, that sacred gift. Nothing is more common than to fall into the practice of uttering fine sentiments, particularly in letter writing, as a matter of course, or a kind of elegant display. Nothing more common in singing than to use words which have a light meaning, or a bad one. All these things are hurtful to seriousness of character. It is for this reason, to put aside others, that the profession of stage players, and again of orators, is a dangerous one. They learn to say good things and to excite in themselves vehement feelings about nothing at all. If we are in earnest, we shall let nothing lightly pass by which may do us good, nor shall we dare to trifle with such sacred subjects as morality and religious duty. We shall apply all we read to ourselves, and this almost without intending to do so, from the mere sincerity and honesty of our desire to please God. We shall be suspicious of all such good thoughts and wishes, and we shall shrink from all such exhibitions of our principles as fall short of action. We shall aim at doing right, and so glorifying our Father, and shall exhort and constrain others to do also. But as for talking on the appropriate subjects of religious meditation, and trying to show piety, and to excite corresponding feelings in another, even though our nearest friend, far from doing this, we shall account it a snare and a mischief. Yet this is what many persons consider the highest part of religion, and call it spiritual conversation, the test of a spiritual mind. Whereas, putting aside the incipient and occasional hypocrisy, and again the immodesty of it, I call all formal and intentional expression of religion's emotions, all studied passionate discourse, dissipation. Dissipation the same in nature, though different in subject, as what is commonly so called. For it is a drain and a waste of our religious and moral strength, a general weakening of our spiritual powers, as I have already shown. And all for what? For the pleasure of immediate excitement. Who can deny that this religious disorder is a parallel case to that of the sensualist? Nay, precisely the same as theirs, from whom the religionists in question think themselves very far removed, of the fashionable world I mean, who read works of fiction, frequent the public shows, are ever on the watch for novelties, and affect a pride of manners and a mincing deportment, and are ready with all kinds of good thoughts and keen emotions on all occasions. Of all such as abuse the decencies and elegancies of moral truth into a means of luxurious enjoyment, what would a prophet of God say? Hear the words of the holy Ezekiel, that stern, rough man of God, a true saint in the midst of a self-indulgent, high-professing people. Thou son of man, the children of thy people still are talking against thee by the walls and in the doors of the houses, and speak one to another, every one to his brother, saying, Come, I pray you, and hear what is the word that cometh forth from the Lord. And they come unto thee as the people cometh, and they sit before thee as my people, and they hear thy words, but they will not do them. For with their mouth they show much love, but their heart goeth after their covetousness. And lo, thou art unto them as a very lovely song, of one that hath a pleasant voice and can play well on an instrument. For they hear thy words, but they do them not. Or consider St. Paul's words, which are still more impressive, because he was himself a man of learning and accomplishments, and took pleasure in due place in the pursuits to which these give rise. Preach the word. Be instant, in season, out of season. Reprove, rebuke, exhort, with all long-suffering and doctrine. For the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but after their own lusts shall they heap to themselves teachers, having itching ears. And they shall turn away their ears from the truth, and shall be turned unto fables. Watch ye, stand fast in the faith, quit you like men, be strong. This has been The Danger of Accomplishments, found in Parochial and Plain Sermons, Volume 2, by St. John Henry Newman, narrated by James T. Majewski. Production copyright 2020 by Trinity Communications. This podcast is brought to you by CatholicCulture.org and made possible by listener support. To donate, please visit CatholicCulture.org/donate/audio. That's CatholicCulture.org/donate/audio.